top, what inspired you to, about making this movie, both from a logistical and a creative standpoint? What inspired you to make this movie, and then how did you make this movie?
I mean, we're going to need a lot more time. Yeah, I mean, the brief answer is, I think like a lot of people my age, I entered the Lampoon through Animal House. There's that great poster that sort of looks like our poster because it's the same artist, Rick Meyerowitz, and I saw that thing in our local theater for, months beforehand, convinced my dad to take me to the movie, and after that, I sought out the magazine. I'm an only child, so mostly through like the older brothers of my friends and places like that. And my producer and I, Susan producer, we had finished our second film, and someone had sort of said, what would be a dream project? And I said the National Lampoon, and she convinced me to try and go meet with the people who were running it at the time, which are, I think one of them's in jail now, the other one just got out of jail. And we made a deal, so we made a deal with them, and then realized shortly after that they had no relationship with anybody we were going to need to talk to make this movie, and set about find people to go talk to.
Fantastic, yeah, and it's such a great film, and it really captures like the progression of an artistic and a comedic institution. And I think one of the super interesting choices that you made in it, excuse me, was to not use any sort of archival stock footage. Oftentimes a trope of documentary is to have, we're talking about Vietnam now, so we're going to see like the last chopper leaving Saigon or whatever. You chose not to do that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two reasons. One is because when we outlined the story, the emphasis on the magazine was going to end right as they start to get into the, doing things like Lemmings and the radio show and Animal House. And I didn't want the magazine to end in the movie 25 minutes in. So by establishing that idea to use the magazine as our sole archive source, it allowed us to put all these things in. I kept making lists when we were writing. I think I had about 20 lists that are like, remember to put this in the movie. And about 2 weeks before we were finished with the movie, I searched my notes, and there's like 130 things there that were like needed to be in the movie, of which we did get a good amount. We sort of got in there. So that was part of it. It also just allows you to immerse yourself in the point of view of all these writers and artists, like how they saw it. So some of the images, for those of you who haven't seen the movie yet, are very specific. It's like they're talking about going to New York, and there's a great piece of art about New York, told in this lampoon, or drawn in this lampoon style. And then there are things where we're talking about Doug Kenny getting lost in Martha's Vineyard for a period of time, and experimenting with acid, and going to this beach where he put some mud on his face. And we were actually interviewing John Belushi's widow, Judy, and she told us where that beach was. And we were like, maybe we'll go shoot that beach. It's like, no, we're going to find something in the magazine. And what we found was this piece of art called Mel Brooks' God. It's a bust of Mel Brooks' head made out of chopped liver. So that becomes our Doug on acid. So to give you an idea. So that's how we used it.
It works to brilliant effect. And I was wondering if, to throw it out to the panel in general, if anyone had any stories that they feel like sum up what it was like to actually work for the National Lampoon. What was that environment like? Like what was the day to day?
I just have one. The cartoon editor was by invitation of Sam Gross, who's brilliant. He's in the movie. And he saw one where clearly Sam had been predicted by the New Yorker, and he had pasted over the caption. And the original caption for the New Yorker was something like, "Oh dear, it must be raining outside." And for Lampoon, he just put "blow me."
So the difference between raining outside and blow me is the National Lampoon. Fantastic. And so we have we're really privileged to have some National Lampoon pieces and some clips that actually didn't make it into the film and sort of stand on their own and speak to the Lampoon experience and the aesthetic. And the first piece up, if we could get it up, is actually, Al, I believe this is one of yours, one that you sort of described as
one of my two articles.
A New York Yankee in King Arthur's court. Can you talk about the genesis of this piece, maybe what it contains and what it meant to you and how it feels to you now?
It was a lot of pitching of puns to sell titles, and it's like, oh, New York Yankee in King Arthur's Court, and they bought it. Jerry Klitzman, who was the editor at the time, and I was thrilled because I loved comic books growing up. And Frank Springer, who's assigned to the bottom there, was a real comic book artist, and this was like the first major thing.